Hello, today I'm here to talk to you about The Left-Handed Darkness, written by Ursula K. Le Guin, and it was published in 1969. Next, let's talk about Ursula Le Guin. She was born October 21st, 1929, and died January 22nd, 2018. She has many other notable works, such as The Dispossessed, Always Coming Home, and the Earthsea series. She graduated from Radcliffe College in 1951 and then achieved her master's a year later at Columbia, and then she immediately worked towards a PhD in French. A few more things about Ursula. She did have three children and she was married to another man who she'd met in France who was also a teacher. She also taught, and she taught at schools such as Stanford, and then her husband Charles taught at Portland, where they spent most of their life in Oregon. And she wrote mostly in the 50s as she was raising her children. That's when her writing career really took off, and that's when she eventually was able to publish most of her books, including the eventual Left Hand of Darkness. Now to talk about the book itself. The book is about a man named Genly I, an alien on a new planet named Gethin, and he has a mission to incorporate a new treaty with him called the Yukumin. Genly meets and talks with Estraven, who's a prime minister, who is later banished by betrayal, but Genly is not blamed for it and he is set free. Genly leaves anyway to go to the Four Towers, another person in the area of Karhide, who can see into the future, and he asks if his mission will be successful within the next 5 years. He is told by Foxa, one of the Four Towers there, that yes, it will be, and then Genly goes into Oberon, where he actually runs into Estraven again, and when arriving, Genry is treated well and placed under a nice house, which is similar to what he was living in when he was in winter. A war begins to break out with Karhide and Oberon, and Genly and Estraven obviously don't want them to fight. It gets to a point where Oberon actually betrays Genly and they arrest him and put him into a concentration camp, otherwise known as a volunteer farm, where he is at the brink of death nearly every other week. Eventually, Estraven comes to the rescue and rescues him as they begin to travel back through the forest to get to Genly's ship, which is what would be able to get the signal so that they could get the Yukumin signed. They want to try again with the king. Genly, while traveling, does end up getting really close with Estraven, even attempting a rare form of speech in which Estraven did not like. It was something called mind speech. It's weird, it's interesting, and not too important with the plot. In the end, they're able to travel through the forest and get to the ship, but it does cost Estraven his life as he knowingly runs into what would be his eventual death in gunfire. And in the end, the Four Towers' predictions were true to Genly as he goes to the king, and once this time the king accepts the proposal of the Yukumin, and it ends with the other people from Genly's planet coming over. So the first reading I'm using to apply this is Real Men Don't Cry and Other Uncool Myths. I talk about this article because it talks about the fact that men shouldn't cry no matter what, and in this case this proves kind of true for Genly, who sees himself different than the rest and that he shouldn't be conveying his emotions. And even at one point, while traveling with Estraven, I believe Estraven is crying, and Genly's like, "What are you doing?" And Estraven's like, "I'm crying. Do you not cry? Do you not have emotion?" And he goes back and thinks about it, and he even talks about how, as a male, he was raised to not show that kind of emotion. And so I found that interesting, that even through him for torture, the death of his friend, and a lot of other just bad things that happened to him, even being away from his family. And I believe it even talks about how he has a kid and being away from his kid, and he's just emotionless, basically. The next reading that I chose was Growing Up Hidden. This article talks about the idea of homosexuality and some of the issues that come with it, and I thought this was interesting because the population of this world that Genly comes to is genderless, even though he's a male and he sees himself as a straight male. He finds himself looking at a few of these genderless people and has rare moments of sexual desire, even though he talks about how he misses women. And then looking at the side of Estraven and Foxa, another character, you could see that they seem to have predominantly female characteristics, but he sees them as male still, and so he kind of has a sexual orientation for that, and then he kind of has a rediscovering of himself. And I mean, he stays straight. He doesn't do anything. He knows better, but seeing Estroven like that, it makes it interesting to think about. The final reading that I chose was Patriarchy the System, and this one is the most interesting to me because it talks about the idea of calling everyone man, even though the society is genderless. We see that Genly calls most people, while thinking to himself, it's like, oh, this is what he said, or I wonder what that guy over there is thinking. And so, relating this to the book, even when there's no set gender, we're still told as a society, or at least we're risen up, that for men and women, when talking, it's like, oh man, this guy said this or he said this. And so it shows that the system holds true no matter what. We even see people in a genderless society referring to him as man or what he said, and it's something that I thought was interesting. Alright, so my thoughts on the book. I thought the book was really strange. I also thought it was ahead of its time in the way that it was written, especially with what's been going on with gender identification in today's society. Seeing someone go through a genderless society was interesting. I do find myself reflecting back on the book a lot, thinking about it, even after reading. I read it a month ago, and there's still times where I'm like thinking, I'm like, oh, did that happen because of this? And I just think about like the small little details in the movie, or in the book. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the book and I would recommend it.